Hansen, present. Vice Chair Jacob Miller.
Present.
Alder Veronica Corpus-Dax. She might be showing up a little bit later. All right.
She is there, but for some reason she said, Alder Corpus-Dax, are you muted still? She may be having audio problems. I know she was just on screen a moment ago.
Okay. Then we'll move on. Commissioner Sydney Bremer.
Present.
All right. Commissioner Darius Daniels.
Present.
Commissioner Autumn Linsmeyer.
Present.
And Commissioner Ken Ravinsky.
Present.
And moving on to the approval of the agenda for the July 26, 2021 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission.
I move approval.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Bremer, second by Vice Chair Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And then moving on to the approval of the minutes from the June 21st, 2021 meeting of the Green Bay Plan Commission.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
All right, motion by Vice Chair Miller and a second by Commissioner Linsmeyer. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, and then moving on to regular business. Starting with a public hearing. This public hearing has been properly posted and public notification has been published in the Green Bay Press Gazette. The Plan Commission is interested in hearing public comments on the subjects. We invite your comments and ask that after your name has been called, you state your address, whether you represent a group or association, whether you favor, oppose, or are only providing information in this matter, and your comments or concerns. We also ask that you confine your testimony to facts related to the proposal at hand and avoid repetitive testimony. You must be recognized by the Plan Commission in order to speak, and please address your comments to the chair. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. We will now open the public hearing on a request to authorize a conditional use permit for a metal storage building exceeding 120 square feet in a public institutional district located at 1520 South Point Road, submitted by Cale Fulsinski, Green Bay Public School District property owner.
Madam Chair, I can give a brief overview.
Thank you, Paul.
The subject property is located at 1520 South Point Road. The property is highlighted in red. It's a rather large parcel. It's about 26 acres, but the building, not the entire site is going to be utilized for the building, just a portion behind Lombardi Middle School. They share the campus with Martin Luther King Elementary to the west. And this proposed detached assessment, the conditional use permit is required because this structure over 120 square feet, which is metal, requires a conditional use permit. So I'll have some further details to provide in the action item.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. So now we're looking for people who would like to speak in favor of this item. Is there anyone wishing to speak that's in opposition to this item? And is there anyone interested in providing information only?
This is Cale Polchinski with Green Bay Area Public Schools. I guess I don't have a specific comments. I just wanted to say that we are providing a building that looks and performs, and I'd say more than adequate manner for the school district and the school and representing the school. But if anyone else had any questions on the building, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
state your address for the record.
Business address? 200.
Business or home address.
Okay, my home address is 2932 Bay Settlement Road, Green Bay.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this item?
I'm wondering if I can ask a question on that.
And actually, you can certainly, if you state your name and address, you can certainly ask a question, but it's not really a question and answer kind of situation. You can certainly ask, and we will check during the actionable item and ask the applicant.
Okay, Paul Bertrand, 2880 West Point Road. I'm wondering what the approximate size of the building is, and if you could show on screen kind of a more specific location of where the building's going.
Okay. And those are excellent questions, and we will certainly address that during the actionable item. For the, I mean, I know that it said that it's 120 square feet, which is like probably a 10 by 12 building is my guess, but we will talk about that during the actionable item. Was there any other comments that you had?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Was there anyone else wishing to speak? Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Was there anyone else wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one came forward, and this public hearing is now closed. And moving on to the corresponding actionable item, item number 2, consideration with possible action on a request to authorize a conditional use permit for a metal storage building exceeding 120 square feet in a public institutional district located at 1520 South Point Road, submitted by Kale Polsinski, Green Bay Area Public School District property owner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll give a few more details about the site. Again, the property is highlighted in red here. This is one parcel, approximately 26 acres in size. West Point Road is to the north, South Point Road heading north-south here. Lombardi Middle School, the athletic field, and Martin Luther King to the west here. This request will replace an existing shed on site, which is located approximately in this area here, if you can see on the screen, just south of the athletic field. The new building will be built or constructed up near the northeast corner of the athletic field. Regarding the future land use, the comprehensive plan recommends here, that's considered the comp plan. The property is basically.
Oh, just so you know, you are.
This is the site plan of the site. Again,
Right.
West Point Road is to the north here. I apologize. Can you hear me?
Right now, yes.
Okay,
It just keeps breaking up.
okay.
Yeah, you have some lag.
Sorry, I apologize. Okay. This is a site plan showing the property. The existing shed is in this corner down here, south of the athletic field. The proposed building will be up on this location here. This is a 30 by 30 structure, so it exceeds that 120 square foot maximum. This is some elevations of the proposed structure. It's showing the metal exterior here, footprint of the building. Some of the next graphics are provided by the applicant showing the existing structure and its rough shape and the need for replacement. They propose a color palette here that's consistent with Lombardi Middle School. And in here, they're calling out the colors. There'll probably be a two-tone color on this proposed structure. And here's a kind of an example of that two-tone, that kind of that look and feel of the proposed structure. Staff has notified affected property owners. We haven't received any calls or questions. The placement of this really doesn't detract from the overall neighborhood, and staff is supporting this request, subject to the standard site plan review and approval.
Okay, thank you so much, Paul. So it's a 30 by 30 building.
It's a 30 by 30 building, 900 square feet, replacing about a 24 by 24 building.
Okay. Go ahead, Commissioner Bremer.
Thank you. Paul, one of the comments that is made is that the new building would not be visible from the main roads that go around the school property. Have you checked that out, or do we have some other way of knowing that? It looks awfully close to those roads, and I'm kind of curious about that. If you put the site plan back up again, I think you'll see what I'm referring to. I did not make it out there to take a look myself, if anybody else did. The report said, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I did not make it out there, but I did pull up the Google image of it. It does look like you would be able to see this building from West Point Road.
Which runs along the north.
Correct.
Right? The wests and souths and norths and all are a little bit confusing in this case. Paul, were you not able to pull that up again?
Let me try one more time here.
Just give it a second. Well, there it comes. It's up. There we go. Thank you.
There was a comment made in the report that they attempted to put it as far south on the property as possible, but this is a fairly north location. I guess this is a question that I would want to ask Mr. Polchinski about.
Am I able to make a comment on this?
We'll give you a chance in just a minute or two, okay?
Sounds good.
And that's the only question I had for Paul. Thank you.
Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just saying, while I'm sitting here, I just brought up the Google view that Ken had mentioned, Commissioner Vinsky, and if you want, I can share that if you think that's useful.
I think it would be.
All right. All right, can everybody see the map for the image?
Yep, there it is.
Okay, so this is West Point Road. You're looking south towards the middle school, which is on the corner, South Point and West Point. I believe the existing shed is this one back here.
Yeah.
And I believe, and Paul or Kale, you can correct me, but the new one would be going in this location, correct? And then, correct. So if I go from basically the entrance, it would be sort of up on this hill. Sort of in this area.
Oh, that is helpful.
I had a question for Paul. My question, so I did a little digging into some of the other, sports facility buildings like this from some of the other schools around town, and I didn't really see like a real cohesion with the building matching up with, the facade of the school or any of the other buildings on site. Is that something that we're concerned about? Is that something that is required? If someone were to put a larger structure like this on their own personal property, would it have to match the facade of their house? Or is that something that is different with, this type of use?
Yeah, I think with this use, it's slightly different in the sense it's an institutional type use. The principal use as a middle school has a brick exterior. This is a detached accessory structure. It's really more incidental to the overall structure. So I think to require masonry on a structure like this, I'm not sure is even possible, but I think the idea or the attempt here was to mitigate that by using a color palette that's consistent with the school's logo, I guess, not so much the building itself.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I do appreciate the use of the wainscoting on the bottom as well, because that's usually where these metal buildings will get most of their damage, and that's easily replaceable if you do it that way. So yeah, I think it's a good looking building and they have a good use for it. I'm going to support it.
Was there any further discussion amongst the commission or any more questions for staff? I feel like there might be, at least the petitioner would like to speak, so.
I move to open the floor for that purpose.
I would second that.
Motion by Commissioner Bremer, second by Commissioner Ravinsky. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the floor is now open. So if there's someone, I guess we'd like to hear, it sounded like Kale that you wanted to speak. So if you could please just state your name and address again for the record and go ahead with your comment.
Kale Polchinski, Green Bay Area Public Schools, 2932 Bay Settlement Road, Green Bay. I just want to put this out there as full disclosure. The contractor on the building, that structure is already erected, and we are fully aware that based off of the decision here, we would have to either modify that building if not approved, or essentially even tear it down. So that contractor worked through a schedule that was not approved by us. So they were aware of the consequences as well. So it is visible from the road. About, I would say the top third of it is visible from the road, South Point Road, I believe. So I wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that before I left the call today. The other reason I also want to jump on for comments is the old structure. One of the reasons it's in such rough shape is being in that corner, we were not able to have a camera on it for vandalism, and being so close to the wooded area, it had lots of, I would say, damage from nature. We would have lots of insects and animal pests in there. So that was also difficult to maintain. So at its new location, we feel it would be much more sufficient to maintain. And then we'll also have video surveillance of that video or of that structure to try to mitigate mostly graffiti, but also other vandalism to that building. So that's all I had.
Thank you so much. Does anyone from the commission have questions for the petitioner?
I guess I should follow up with the other part of my question that I was inappropriately addressing to Paul. Mr. Polchinski, can you explain the comment that every attempt was made to put this structure as far south on the property as possible, that is as far back away from West Point?
Yes, actually the structure is within, I would say, maybe a foot or so of the track. So we want to make it usable for the track and fields, but it's, I would say it's within a couple feet of the track. So we've pushed it about as far as we can next to the track. There's also a walkway towards South Point Road. So on the other side of that walkway is the garden, which you may be aware of. So we've pushed it basically as far as we can between the track and the walkway. Also where you see the fence line, I'm sorry, I'm not able to point to it, but there's a fence line that runs essentially north and south. That is a pretty steep elevation change. So you really can't put any sort of building or structure on that elevation.
and putting it on the other end of the track and field and football field area would have invited the same vulnerability to vandalism that you mentioned before. Is that correct?
That was our thought process, correct?
Okay. Thank you. That does explain what I was wondering about. Thanks.
Do we have any more questions for the petitioner?
I think now that I know it's built, I want to see it moved 6 inches over.
Oh.
Thanks,
No,
Ken.
Yeah, nothing else.
All right. Was there anyone else wishing to speak on this item? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to close the floor.
So moved.
I second.
Motion by Commissioner Ravinsky, second by Commissioner Bremer. All those in
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, back to regular order. Any further discussion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Alder Corpus Dax, second by Commissioner Bremer. Any further discussion? All right, go ahead with a voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? So then that will go through, that's unanimously approved, going through to City Council. And when is that next City Council meeting? I can't math at the end of the month.
Sorry, August 2nd, I believe is the first, next, or August 3rd, Tuesday, August 3rd is the city council meeting, yes.
Yep. I don't have a calendar in front of me and I'm mathing at the end of the month and adding in 7 days plus 1. Okay, perfect. All right, so August 3rd. And then moving on to item number 3, consideration with possible action on the appointment of Tracy Hillesheim from the Wyatt on Main to the Downtown Green Bay Inc.'s Business Improvement District Board. I guess
I can help with that.
There we go. Wendy Townsend has a staff report for that.
perfect.
Yes, Tracy has been a member of the Downtown Business Improvement District for some time. She has submitted her resume and would like to request, along with the Downtown Incorporated Business District bid appointment.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Is there any discussion amongst staff or amongst the commission?
No, reading through her resume, I think, she fits the bill for what we need there. So I would move to approve.
All right, so motion by Commissioner Ravinsky.
Second.
Was that a second by Commissioner Linsmeyer? All right, thank you. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead with a voice vote. All of those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? And then that will go on to City Council for August 3rd. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much, Wendy.
Sorry, I have no power in my house. We had a tornado or something blow through. I don't know if you see this, but look at all the trees down. So I'm outside because I don't have any lights or anything. It's crazy. Thanks again. Bye now.
All right. Okay, and then moving on to item number 4, public hearing. Public hearing on updates to Article, what is that? Off-street parking, drives, and loading. Green Bay Municipal Code submitted by Green Bay Community and Economic Development. I got the 8 part, but I can't remember. Is X50? Is it 100?
X is 10.
I failed my Roman numerals. All right.
We're
Fine.
going for 18 total.
Thank you.
All right. Well, and this is David.
Thanks, David.
I'll just give just a quick preview. So we updated or repealed and recreated the parking code in September of 2019. It was always staff's intention to sometimes bring this back in 2020 to just kind of review, make sure it's performing how it should, make any tweaks that need to be done. You almost always do that when code is rewritten. Of course, the pandemic and everything kind of got in the way. And so it has been about 2 years, but that is really the reason for these updates. And there's a little more than there's about a dozen and a half for discussion.
Okay, that sounds good. And so with this being the public hearing portion of it, we'll hear about everything else and all the details on the actionable item. So with the public hearing on this update, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this item? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this item? And is there anyone looking to provide information only? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Is there anyone wishing to speak? Let the record reflect that no one came forward, and this public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item number 5, consideration with possible action and review of updates to Article 18, off-street parking, drives, and loading, Green Bay Municipal Code, submitted by Green Bay Community and Economic Development.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Okay, so as I had just mentioned, let me share the screen here quick. Okay, can everybody see just a lot of text? No fun pictures? Sorry about that. So 2 years ago, we repealed and recreated the parking code, and we did a few minor edits since then for drive-throughs mainly. But what we had done is basically inspection, community development, and DPW and engineering kind of took a look at the code. We took any suggested changes, things that have been problems or confusing or just anything that should be tweaked in the code or wasn't performing the way we expected. And we basically came up with 14 amendments. And before I kind of get into them, what I really want to say is that we really want this item to act as a workshop. So a lot of free-flowing talking about each of the items. If there's anything that you as commissioners have noticed to have been problematic in the code, to bring that up and we will jot it down and look into it. And then we would bring this back on August 9th for actual action. There is one item that we received late correspondence from DPW late today about one aspect. And that one you might need a little bit more time to digest. I think staff does as well. But I'm just going to go over these really quickly, and you'll notice the red, white, and blue that's on here. So the white is basically an amendment or a change that no matter where it came from, that there was no disagreement. Everybody agreed with it. No problem. The blue, where it has full staff support. However, there was considerable discussion. And then the red is where there is potential conflict or controversy between staff. And we can kind of get into that. So I'm going to go through all of them really quick. And then they do correspond. In your packet, there should be a summary list, and it has the page number on and the section. And then in the code itself will be the draft code that's in your packet. We'll have a strike through, red strike through for text that's being deleted, and red underline for text that's being added or augmented. So the first one was basically to better define material exposure as it relates to non-conforming parking facilities. So that is, as somebody's rebuilding their parking lot, at what point is it considered reconstruction and what point is considered maintenance? The code had always basically it said if you expose the base material, it's reconstruction. If you're just putting more asphalt over the top, it's maintenance. That was felt to be confusing by some contractors, I suppose. And so basically what we kind of cleared it up saying, if you expose the base material at all, that is not maintenance, that's reconstruction. And we put an IE in there, compacted gravel. So when you think of that, the gravel underneath is like the foundation of the house. The asphalt or concrete on top is like the house. So once you expose that base, so we just define that a little bit better. The second one, number 2, is to allow snow removal equipment to be stored in parking lots or parking facilities from November through April. And that's going to be for multifamily, but non-single or 2-family uses. So if somebody's got a snow plow they want to store in their parking lot, currently that is not permitted. This change would allow them to store it in that parking lot during the winter. The third item is removing the requirement that vehicles that are parked on private lots and single and 2-family homes be licensed and registered. So our current code requires every vehicle parked on a site to be licensed and registered. Otherwise, it would have to be in a storage area. Now, you can store things in your backyard. If you're a commercial lot, you can store them in a fenced-in commercial area. But this would be to remove that requirement. Number 4 was to allow permeable paver systems for parking facilities per DNR specs. That's something you're going to see a few more of those things come forward. We did a green infrastructure code audit, and there were quite a few things in there that were recommended to change to make the city more green or sustainable. So that came out of that. The 5th one is clarification on the size of wheel strips. So as a residential lot, you can have a full driveway, or you can have 2 strips of concrete that run up where your wheels would go. And that's been permitted in the code probably forever. You see it in a lot of older neighborhoods. It's pretty unique. It's also very sustainable. This just defines a little bit better what that is. 12 to 18 inches, basically, for that size. The next 2 actually can kind of be lumped together, and traffic engineer Dave Hansen is here to kind of speak on these. But basically what they are both addressing are locations of driveways. So, and primarily driveways on arterial streets, the way it's been kind of evolved. You did receive a memo. I emailed it out to you. It's pretty technical, and I think Dave will be able to explain it easier than I. Number 8 was add a maximum number of stalls to areas that don't have a minimum. So if you remember our code, anything more than 200%, the minimum requires council approval. Downtown doesn't have a minimum, so therefore would have no maximum. So we basically just put in there that if it had a minimum, if it had to follow the minimum for the use, that would apply for the maximum. And then we also switched it out kind of based on the discussion over there on Huron Road. All parking lots, 20 stalls or less, had been exempt from this regulation. We beefed that up to 40 stalls, just to give a little more leeway for smaller business. Number 9 was allow 24 inches of additional pavement beyond garage doors. So the current code was drafted to say you can have a driveway going right up to the garage door. The previous code and most codes will allow 18 to 24 inches on each side of the garage door because that's the width of the garage. So this is just correcting that. Number 10, removing the requirement for a vehicle trespass block on residential driveway tapers unless it becomes an issue. So our maximum driveway width for a residential lot is 25 feet wide. But a lot of times garages are 30 feet wide or 35 feet wide, or there might be a parking stall next to it. So the driveway starts to get really wide on the lot. And what that provision basically says is you have to taper it down to 25 feet. When we did the full rewrite and update to the code, one of the problems that was expressed by inspection where people were driving over it anyway, and it was turning into mud and being unsightly. So we put a requirement in the code that there had to be some type of vehicle block, some trespass block, whether that's a tree, a bush, a big rock, a giant garden gnome. Didn't really matter what you put there, just something that you couldn't drive over, right? Since that time, inspection felt that that was very unnecessary and should only really be needed if it becomes an issue. So we did draft the code to say to not require it unless there's complaints. So if you're not driving over that tapered triangle, there's no reason to put a block there. But if you are and it becomes an issue, then you would be required to. Number 11, basically for single and two family open parking stalls, so not stalls in a garage, but just open stalls, we did not have a definition for size. We neglected to put that in there. It's a little bit smaller than what a commercial lot would be, being that it's a residential lot. So 8 by 15 is pretty much the standard. A regular code require 18 feet of depth. The reason why it can be dropped down to 15, because on a residential lot, you have a lot of overhang onto grass so that your wheels stop on the pavement, but your car might be a little bit further out. So we just define that. Also, if you're using a driveway, if you're on a small lot, a driveway is considered a spot for you. That would be the length, 15 feet by 8 feet wide. And that's our minimum driveway width as well. Number 12 also relates to open parking. So this could be open parking next to your garage or in your backyard. The current code requires it to be screened with a 5-foot hedge wall, fence, or other barrier that's 90% impervious to sight. That was mainly put in place because of headlights, noise, emissions, those types of things for when you're parking on a residential lot, a single or two family lot. We received a lot of pushback on that one. And one of the arguments that came up that was a pretty good argument that if you're parked in your driveway, you don't have to screen, but if you're parked next to your garage, you do. And does that make sense? And so we kind of put this one in here. That screening requirement was mainly because of rear yard parking lots, which we do not have very many of those in the city. And then of course, always the neighbors can screen their site from the surface parking. Number 13 was remove buffering requirements buffer requirements for parking lots abutting a street. Currently, the code, the way it's written, it refers to buffers, usually when you have a commercial use next to a residential, let's say. You have a certain distance, it's a buffer, requires certain trees, shrubs, and fencing, typically, or berming. The way the code was drafted, it also put that same requirement on the street side. So that was just sort of something that is not enforced that we really can't do. You don't want to buffer everything from the street. So we removed that buffering requirement. It still does require landscaping, however, but it wouldn't require the full screening. And then the last item was add an 18-foot driveway throat length for multifamily and non-residential parking lots. And sort of the image to the right, which you can see here, and excuse me, it says 20 feet, it should say 18. I'll fix that. But this is basically when you're entering a commercial or non-residential, single or two-family residential parking lot, it gives you one car length before you start stacking into the street. So what potentially happens is somebody is backing out of one of these close stalls, and if it's right up tight, 5-foot setback, the person waiting for this person to back out is then blocking the street. So it doesn't happen, real often, and, people learn to stop and that kind of thing. But the one car length, throat distance could potentially solve some problems. Also, if the lot wasn't configured this way, let's say the stalls were going parallel with the driveway, then that throat length would almost not matter. You'd have 18 feet before that drive aisle. A stall is 18 feet deep. So this was an addition for safety. And with that, I'm kind of I want to jump back to these colored ones. I kind of went into larger detail on the license plates, and I wanted to kind of give you the reason why I believe that was in the previous code. And this has been in the Green Bay Code for a long time, primarily to stop residential lots from becoming kind of storage yards or hobby lots, so to speak. Somebody, I don't want to say car hoarder, but somebody who likes to collect cars may have quite a few cars on their property in legal parking spaces, because we wouldn't let them park outside of that. However, the cost for licensing and registering cars will typically halt somebody from just accumulating a lot of vehicles, because they don't have any cost at that point except the initial purchase. The inspection division felt that was kind of overreaching. I mean, some cars are parked in the backyard. You can't see them. It's very difficult for them to determine if they're registered or licensed. And once they're operable on the street, it becomes a police situation where the police will determine if they're registered if they don't have tags or license plate. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. And 6 and 7, now what I have written here is a little bit different from what you received in your memo. Dave combined the two together really, and what he's going for is a safety situation. So we currently have a distance from intersections for a driveway has to be at least 25 feet from the property line or 35 feet from the curb line at an intersection to kind of give you some stacking before you get to that intersection, so there's not conflict there. This is a very basic, set number, and obviously the engineering in that is much more complicated, and Dave will kind of get to that in a second. And number 6, that was number 7. Number 6 deals with driveway locations. So the current code requires if you're a multifamily or non-single or two-family residential and you're on a corner with an arterial and let's say a local street, you would have to locate your driveway on that arterial street or collector street before the local. If you're a single or two-family use on that same corner, you would have to orient your driveway to the local street rather than the arterial or collector. So kind of keeping those business traffic separated from residential traffic, so to speak, even though you're at a corner. So those are the 14 items. I did want to kind of give you a little bit of I don't know how to put it, a little bit of heads up about what those roads are. So a primary arterial street is intended to provide high volume, moderate speed traffic between major activity centers. This is coming out of our comp plan from the 2022 comp plan. Minor arterial is a street which augments and feeds the principal arterial system, and it's intended for moderate volume, moderate speed traffic. Access to abutting property is partially controlled. Then we also have, so those are arterials, those are our big streets. We have a collector street, and that is a street that collects and distributes traffic to and from local and arterials. So it's taking local traffic, go to a collector, they go up to an arterial. And Dave can probably give you some good examples. And then a local street is obviously a low volume, low speed, short length street, typically accessing residential or low impact businesses. And then in 2000, when the comp plan was done, the city was shown to have about 10% principal arterials out of all of our streets, 11% minor arterials, about 11% collectors, and just about 68% local. So with that, I think I'm going to defer to Dave Hansen to kind of explain the memo a little bit better. But I do want to stress at this time, it's really open flow discussion. Again, to me, I'm not an engineer and the stuff can get kind of complicated. I did talk to Dave earlier. He's great at explaining it. So, and then staff as well has not had a lot of time to digest. So we'll probably bring this one up for more discussion on August 9th. But with that, I guess, I don't know if the chair, if you could recognize Dave.
Yeah, yes, I would like to recognize Dave. I'm sorry, I would like to recognize Mr. Hanson, if you could please go ahead and give your comments.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So, as Mr. Buck had stated, the memo was submitted to him later today. I do apologize on the tardiness. I really tried to get it into the agenda packet, but last week was a very busy week with training and trying to keep up with regular business here. But anyway, we're here tonight. We're here to talk about it, and I don't want to spend too much time because, as David mentioned, that this is more intended to be a workshop, no real action on this. But so if you've had the chance to read it, excellent. If you haven't, I think what I'm probably going to do is just go over the executive summary that I prepared for it rather than go over all 6 pages of it. And I guess to really start off, and I highlighted this right in the beginning of the memo, that this memo really is only to apply, or any potential change to the ordinances, applied to intersections with at least one of the intersection streets classified as an arterial. And David explained that quite well. Examples that I can say locally for an arterial street would be anything that's numbered or lettered. So county highway, state highway, US highway, those are all going to be arterials by definition, meant to carry regional traffic. Obviously, you're going to see much higher traffic volumes on them because they're intended to carry traffic from region to region. So on our local system, those would be anywhere from Main Street, East Mason, West Mason Street, Monroe Avenue, Walnut. They all have some sort of a letter number designation to them. Now, we do have some arterial streets that are not on that on a county or a state system, but would be locally maintained, such as Military Avenue. Military is a minor arterial, which is kind of came to a surprise to me when I learned that, because we actually went on a road diet with that back in 2010. It was a 6-lane facility with turn lanes, very wide roadway, and it's definitely right sized now. But that would be one example of a local arterial. So with that being said, the whole core of this memo it pertains to functional area of an intersection. And functional area really is kind of broken up into 2 areas. You have, well, it's not really 2. There are 2 areas in an intersection. First is going to be the intersection itself. So right in the middle of the intersection where all the conflicting movements take place, that's just considered the physical area of an intersection. And areas approaching or upstream from the intersection and downstream of the intersection, those would be considered functional areas. Now, the distances that define that, I wish that I could have just summarized it in a basic table, but we engineers like to make things complex so that we can just get, things through the planners. No, I'm just kidding. Bad joke. But, as part of my professional engineering licensure, when I knew this was coming up, and I knew that in the past we've had issues with particular driveways along arterials, and it's sometimes been a long, lengthy process, even getting to the point of legal action on some of them relative to trying to get these driveways in a more position in a more safe manner, so that it obviously with Public Works, we're responsible for maintaining our roads and streets. So it's our goal and our objective to keep them safe as possible. And, quite frankly, I think that all of this really benefits the developers anyway, because nobody wants to have a development that doesn't have a successful, satisfying customer experience. And it's my opinion that if we right size and right locate driveways on these very busy streets using this one access management technique, I think it would certainly improve the quality of life, the safety, and satisfaction of those developers and their customers. Now back to functional area. I explained 2 items. So in the functional area, I'm going to get a summary. This is the area where motorists have to make numerous decisions regarding turning, stopping, accelerating, exiting, merging, weaving, etc. Accesses that are too close to intersections can cause serious traffic conflicts and greatly impair of these facilities. DPW's goal is to eliminate accesses within the functional area of an arterial intersection and not permit new ones. Now, one item that came up, if you've perused this at all and you start looking, even at table 1, you start seeing some of these distances, and a great question I think that anyone can ask and should be asking is, well, what happens when you don't have enough length? Say your property is only 100 foot of frontage and this functional area is larger than that. Well, that's where we have to look at it and say, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to fit that. And so I think there's a couple of different options. You got one where you try and push that driveway as far away from the intersection, because the further away you get from the intersection, at least the motorists that are impacted by the intersection, all road users, I should say, not just motorists, we got bicyclists, we got pedestrians, we got micro mobility now with our bird scooters. All we're saying is push it as far away as practicable and possible from the intersection to make there is some advance warning time so that these road users can make the appropriate decisions to avoid any sort of a crash. So with that being said, in essence, what I am asking for is a modification to section 4-1698 access distance from intersections of our Code of Ordinances by approving the proposed modifications and additions contained in the memo. So like I said, I really don't want to go over all of the detail. It's in here. It may look complex. It's actually, to me, quite easy. And I know that sometimes we want things to be easy to look at tables and everything, but that's why you have a traffic engineer at the city. And that's why we're also limiting the arterial intersections. And we heard the percentages that Mr. Buck had stated. So we're really not talking about a lot of time dedicated to this by staff. And you'll notice that in one of the calculations for D4, the Q estimation, that's something that, again, you've got a person on staff and my staff that can come up with these numbers. This is what we do for a living. So with that being said, there's other details. I certainly encourage you, if you have not read the memo, to read it in its entirety. And if you have questions, not only would be happy to answer them. And if you need some more time, I'd be more than willing to when there is action being taken on this item.
And I would suspect that we would have Dave back next meeting to kind of get into this one a little bit deeper. It is a significant change right now, like I said. So your approach or your upstream, if I'm saying that right, Dave, your upstream approach to the intersection right now would require a 35-foot setback from the intersection to your driveway. Again, only on arterials. With this one would be varying, but to give you an example, on a 35-mile-an-hour street, it would be 250 feet. So a pretty significant change. The exit, I think, or that would be the downstream. The upstream would probably be a little bit more, but it would be a more complicated calculation that we would have Dave and engineering staff take care of. But it would require, and we would not go through and remove driveways, but as parking lots are reconstructed or hit that threshold for reconstruction, which is not very big, it's about 500 square feet, they would then have to come into compliance unless we put some kind of an out in here or a qualifier to say, full reconstruction will require the driveway to be moved or something like that. And as I had mentioned, Planning staff didn't really get a lot of time to take a look at it, so we don't really have a recommendation on it. We think it seems we totally understand why Public Works is proposing it for safety reasons. We just don't know what that impact would be on our, primarily commercial corridors.
So I have two questions for Dave. Actually, Dave Hansen. Sorry. The one with the knowledge of roads. Well, I guess one's a question and the other one's more of I'm wondering if we could look at an example of something and just kind of do like a walkthrough of if that were done today, what that would mean for that development, if that's possible. And I mean, not holding you to anything without, I know you have to figure stuff out, but the first question, basically this would mean that the streets coming up to the arterial street would be getting more traffic. But the idea is that the more traffic would be at a lower speed, so there would be less area of conflict. Is that what I'm getting from this?
Correct. That, and you have less exposure. One of the points I make in the memo is that a driveway, two-way driveway on an arterial undivided 4-lane roadway has 23 conflict points. And that's just with motor vehicles. That's not including sidewalks. So add that, and let's say we have bike lanes on it, you're going to be adding more conflicts. We are in a point in our city right now where I think we are trying to encourage alternate modes of transportation, such as biking and micromobility and walking. And we're even seeing multi-use trails even on Webster Avenue and bike lanes. So with all those conflict points, all we're trying to do is get those conflict points out of the areas where we see where there are problems and they're problematic. Now, I know that sometimes that there may be residential or neighborhood opposition to something like this, because I think there's this presumption that all of this traffic is somehow going to go through the neighborhood. I think as long as that access from that side road is done properly at the arterial, what you're doing is actually encouraging flow away from the neighborhoods and onto that busier street, whether it be a controlled intersection, maybe there's ped features at that for crossing, whatever. You want to make it more attractive for them to do that, while at the same time you're significantly reducing that exposure and creating a safer situation, and putting those road users in an expected location for entry onto that arterial.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Could I bring up an example and kind of look at that and see what it would mean with this change if it were done today?
Sure.
Can I share my screen?
I believe you can.
Okay. And I do want to apologize ahead of time because I know this one, there was some things, workings with the city came to mind because I go here often. So I don't know if you can see my screen now, but the Grand Central Station on East Mason and Bellevue Street.
Check, we can see it.
Okay. So I'm looking at this distance here from the intersection to this driveway here is 189 feet. And if I'm correct, I believe this is a 35 mile per hour. That would mean this driveway opening wouldn't be allowed per the new code?
That's not my, well, number one, that is a 30 mile an hour zone. So it would be 200. And you can tell that I believe that's two parcels because I believe that they were supposed to expand to the west. So what I'm seeing right here would be actually compliant with what I'm proposing. They just moved that driveway access as far off from the intersection as possible. Okay. So I don't see any problem with that. Now, ideally, I think we'd like to see access off of Bellevue. Like, let's just say, let's consolidate the driveways from two. Now, sometimes logistically on the site, it may not make a lot of sense. Let's just say for this situation, you have tanker trucks that come in on a regular, routine, and they have to get around somewhere. Well, they're not going to be out of that same access. So 2 access points for this type of a land use is probably more realistic. So quite frankly, other than potentially there being a shift to the Bellevue Street access location, the one on Mason Street, I think, would have been compliant with what I'm proposing.
Yeah, if this were 2 parcels, that would fall under what David was talking about before, that it's the furthest you can get functionally. The other thing that, if I can add something to this, if there were a development on this green space, that driveway also would have to be pushed as far to the east, I guess, as possible. And preferably, if putting words in David's mouth, preferably you'd exit onto John, not Mason.
That what we're kind of talking about, that if there was a new development in that green space, that it would have to have their exits out to John Street. Or does it, because we're talking local arterial versus other.
Right. The ideal would be for them to go onto John Street with the proposal. However, if they were on Mason, they would have to try to get the, I guess that would be upstream distance, whatever that would be, from that intersection back.
That's also a tough example as well, because we worked as part of a planned unit development for that property. So even though it's 2 parcels, the intent is to have that be a shared driveway on East Mason Street to reduce the conflict. So I don't think we want access to John Street or to Kimball because those are residential streets. The intent was to consolidate as much as we could.
You're saying that in the future, that it's possible that that green space will be able to utilize that driveway on East Mason? I guess it doesn't matter, but I'm just thinking for future, I mean, not this specific property, I understand, but.
Right. For this specific property, they would have to.
Right. Okay.
Sorry, Paul.
That's okay. It's sometimes difficult to compare apples to apples, oranges to oranges. Just, every situation is a little bit different.
And that's the point that I wanted to emphasize. As I saw it in the drafting here, there is reference to working out particular arrangements for particular circumstances. And I noticed, Dave Hansen, as you repeat the issues along here, you're often saying, ideally, we would want it this way. It's almost as if what we're talking about with your grid, with your set of numbers or your tables, is that we want to move as close to that direction as is feasible. Am I understanding that correctly?
Correct, yes. If you can match the numbers of the calculational area, then great. That's ideally what we want. And if you cannot, based off of limitations of the size of the parcel, as in the frontage, then you just have to just push those driveways as far away from those critical intersections as possible.
So we're looking for a language here then that would say as close to X or Y ideal as is feasible for any particular circumstance.
Equal or as close, yes.
Right. Is that it ultimately means if they can't meet that, they're going to be coming back to us to ask for permission to maybe do, like Paul said on this example, was a PUD or some other kind of arrangement with the city that allows it?
Well, they could request a variance based on a hardship through the Board of Appeals. That's always an ability to do that with the zoning code. But yeah, we would have to draft the language to be flexible.
Yeah.
But again, it is a big shift from the existing. So
perhaps now in the August 9th meeting, David, you could look at whether there's room to make that language more flexible. or build in the notion that there is some negotiating that needs to happen if the ideal can't be met.
Yep, and I'll for August 9th, I'll work with Dave to get maybe a couple examples, and then we'll talk language.
Yeah, just real quick question. Would you say, I know this is a big change, is this more restrictive or less restrictive than the current language?
It's much more restrictive.
I'm sorry, what was that?
It's much more restrictive.
Okay, so it's much more restrictive, but that is being done to eliminate risk?
Correct. That's the argument.
And
to increase safety, maybe, is a better way to put it.
Okay, because my next question is, what has the risk been in the past that we need to put a more restrictive program in place?
I'm not sure how many accidents are caused. I don't know if that's something we could figure out, caused by that distance or not.
Yeah, if you don't mind, if I can interject. I think it would be very hard to quantify that within the city, the exact distances that these have come across. I can just tell you anecdotally, when I'm doing safety reviews at intersections, I can tell you that the predominant crashes or the locations of crashes is closer to the intersection. Further away you get away from an intersection, the less crashes you find. So all I'm trying to do is just one by one here, trying to make all of our intersections safer. And we've been actually incorporating PUDs through the traffic impact analysis process. A lot of larger developments. I mean, this is just standard. This is what we do. This is access management 101. This isn't something that's been derived, within the last 5-10 years. Functional area has been something for a very long time. And to be quite frank, on all state highways, it's mandated by state statute that this is implemented. This isn't even a question on state highways. When I say state highways, I know I'd mentioned before, the lettered and the numbered system, but a majority of those highways, I should say the numbered ones, the state highways, are what we call a connected highway system, where we, the city, are actually the custodians of that street right away. And the state, in essence, pays the city to badge it and have be constructed to particular standards and so forth. So not everything would be required of a connecting highway, as in a state highway that is completely under the jurisdiction of the DOT. All we're trying to do is just in locations and opportunities. I really want to look at this as an opportunity, because there are so many developments that where I see them just right out of the gates, it's like, well, why would you put that driveway that close to here? I mean, you're just asking for problems. And we've seen it. We've seen it in multiple areas. I mean, I don't think I could probably give each of you 20 seconds and you'll come up with one or two locations where you go, wow, why did they put that driveway there? That's really not a smart location. And all I'm really trying to do is just one by one from the year 2021 on is just try to make this a better and safer place for everyone and have a better quality of life.
So if I could follow up on that comment, I can come up with one example right away, and that's Wally's Spot and the new Popeyes. Lisa's laughing because I just kept asking, are we sure this is okay? Did the plan for the new Popeyes fall within the parameters that you've sketched out for us here, David? Is this an example of where you applied this sort of reasoning?
Well, this proposal is more focused on, I'd say, corner lots. That's why it's addressed as such. As you know, the Wally Spot location is not a corner lot. It's one off from it.
One way, yeah.
But as access management, it happened to be in concert with this proposal, as in that driveway really was pushed away from the main Mason signal as far as possible. So yes, it would be compliant with this.
Okay, that gives you a way of understanding the usefulness of the parameters that you're setting up here. I would have understood more quickly the reason for accepting this as a safe arrangement had we been talking in terms of these parameters. Thank you. That's very helpful to me.
You're welcome. But one other example I kind of wanted to, I think that to me was, I guess this was the initiating project that, this really became important with groups over on University and Webster.
Yeah.
As you probably know, that there is a left turn in if you're going westbound into that clinic. But you can see how far away from the intersection it was. Well, that was not exactly an easy thing to have happen. I prepared a memo that used a lot of these principles, and it literally got down to the legal end of it, where we're meeting with attorneys and things like that. And to me, I'm going, well, this is kind of a no-brainer. And they're going, no, this isn't a no-brainer. We want this open here. We want full access and, all that. And we're like,
Yeah.
We just really don't think. And the thing that really surprised me is that it was a clinic for their employees. I'm trying to make it here. I'm actually trying to work with you on this. But, and so I think once I kind of said that, they kind of got the idea that, yeah, I guess he really is thinking about us, and I'm thinking about everybody. This is it's an equity situation, to be quite frank, that all road users and customers are we're putting them in a safer situation as much as we can.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I guess, so this is all coming back to us on the 9th, but right now we're just kind of talking it out, kind of getting our feeling for it. I guess, was there anything, this was specific to the item, sorry, I'm having technology problems. My phone, a tiny little phone here, hold on.
So yeah, this was specific to items 6 and 7. However,
Okay.
all 14 of the potential amendments are if you have any questions with any of them, major concerns that jump out, if there's something in the current code that you've noticed over the last 2 years that have been problematic from a planning perspective, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I have that's already in here, but between now and the next meeting would be that opportunity. And really, we would like to hear anything new you have, or like this item, any requests. So I have, we're going to come up with a couple examples, some flexible language, and maybe take a look at what some of the surrounding communities are using, for that one. But if you have the same type of concerns with any of them, bring them on.
All right, so about 3 specifically. So requiring them to, I don't have a problem not requiring people to register stuff, but I mean, how do you keep it not? Or is it just, what happens when you have somebody who has just a bunch of cars without plates on them, not moving, sitting there? Like, how do we regulate that? Is that a complaint? Is that something that would go through, it's too hot. I'm sorry, words are failing me. Inspection is that something that you could complain to the city and the inspectors would come out? But what are the regulations for that?
You could. Right now, if there were an excessive amount of cars, as long as they're legally parked and licensed, they're okay to be there. So you can't park them on your front lawn, but if they're in the driveway or legally parked in the backyard or in any of your open parking spots, but they would still have to be licensed and registered right now. With this change, the same thing would apply. You still couldn't park on your lawn. You still couldn't, do anything like that, but they wouldn't need to be licensed or registered. So if the car didn't move for 5 years and it was licensed every year, you could have it. In the scenario that you just mentioned, if it didn't have a license plate, it could just sit there the same. So, I mean, really that licensing and registration is a way to make it financially difficult to stockpile if they're not being moved.
Yeah. Because, for example, like I have a property where I have a tenant who's had a car that's sitting for 2 years, and I got a letter from the city, they got a letter from the city, and they've kept it in compliance and registered and licensed it. It's just one car. I'm very aware of it. But then I think about my friends who live next door to people who they just continuously are bringing cars that aren't licensed, aren't plated, and they're just sitting there and they're on the parking pad. But I don't know. I guess I just don't. I'm concerned. I don't have a problem with people, like my tenant, who I'm aware of her one vehicle, the one vehicle in the parking lot that's sitting there, but because it's a big lot. But when we're talking about in a very residential, and you've got a bigger driveway, I mean, I have a huge driveway. I could just, I'm concerned that inspection is going to go out there. And if we put this in there, that there's not going to be any kind of way for them to, and you can't really put a limit either.
I think
Right.
the vehicles don't need to be, with this, they don't need to be licensed, but they would still need to be likable. Like you wouldn't be able to just have cars like on blocks.
Correct.
Sitting there as stored.
But if they're on wheels and just sitting there and not moving, we can't regulate that, right?
Correct.
If they're on blocks, yeah, absolutely. But if they're just dead vehicles with all their parts, like we can't regulate that.
Yeah, we wouldn't be able to make the determination if they were operable or not.
Right.
As long as they had tires and windshields.
So would there be other, like with your example there, if there were like rodents or something going in and out, or like excessive trash or any debris piling up on it, then that would be a city inspection issue. And that's when they would be able to come out and, clean up the nuisance. You're saying with this is that the license and registration doesn't really matter until you actually hit the road, basically.
Correct.
And then it's a PD issue and not city inspection.
Right.
I guess whether they're licensed or not, it doesn't make a difference.
Right. I guess I mentioned it just before. I think, and it's only my thoughts on it. The reason this was put in was to stop vehicle hoarding. They probably, I don't know if everybody knows, I know several people that love auto auctions, and they'll go buy 3 or 4 cars, park them in their driveway, and never look at them again until they junk them or whatever. Maybe that's just my friends. But if they had to pay $75 to $125 a year to license them every year, they wouldn't store them there. Potentially. I think that is the reason that provision was put into the code. I can't say that for certainty, but that's what I think.
So my question for the code, is there a limit to how many cars can occupy like a square footage of a driveway? Or like you could literally put cars right next to each other as long as they're not a nuisance? They could be literally stacked next to each other?
Correct. So there's a bunch of different determinations. So they have to be in a legal parking space. So that's driveway, garage, one open space next to a garage, or a rear yard parking lot. And that's if you're coming and going. A multi or 2-family might have a rear yard parking lot rather than garages. The other provision in the code, and it's not in the parking code, is if you put vehicles on pavers in your backyard, you can store pretty much whatever you want in the backyard on pavers. That's really a provision that was put in place for RVs, boat trailers, snowmobile trailers, that kind of stuff. So that's where you can park anything and everything. And even you know, a single family house could have 5 driving aged people. They might have 5 cars, and if they have legal spots for them all, okay. I mean, if they have too many cars and not enough room, they have a problem where they're going to have to. It's going to be an internal problem for them.
Is there a way of defining what a legal spot would be? You know, if your driveway, like I can fit 4 cars in my driveway and still be able to open the doors and get in and out. I could probably fit 6 if I stacked them. But to define that, like a parking stall is a 17 by 8 foot area, you can only fit a certain amount of cars per driveway based on square footage. Is that something that could go in the code?
Well, the code with these changes would make a parking space 8 feet wide by 15 feet deep. So that's your dimensional regulation for a parking space. And then, yeah, if you can fit them in your driveway, if your driveway is, 15 feet long, you can only fit 1 car. If it's 2 lane, fit 2 cars. Yeah, and that is all defined in the code. What's a legal space? Technically, a driveway is not a legal space, but you can park in it when it leads to a legal space. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So in other words, there are provisions in here that limit people from just piling cars into their driveway.
Correct. Except for the rear yard. The backyard has pretty loose regulations on storage.
And that is spelled out in the code that it would have to be in the backyard?
Correct.
Because I think it's the front yard situation, Lisa, that you're especially concerned about, and just the whole business of what's unsightly. Do we have any language about that in the code?
That's a very judgmental opinion on what's unsightly. I mean, a rusty car to one person is a beauty and awesome to somebody else.
So is it possible to put numbers to that? No more than X number of cars for any period of time that exceeds a week in front of the front line of a house between in the setback from the street?
We could do that. I mean, you can do that. However, that might have some pretty heavy negative effects, especially for very small urban lots that don't have any other place to park their cars. Mm-hmm. So again, a household with 5 drivers on a ranch that can fit them in the driveway, but there's no place else to put them. If you limit that to 3, those people can no longer utilize their parking spaces in their driveway for their household. So that might have some I suspect that would have very negative consequences. And Paul would probably, he staffs the Board of Appeals. I think he's seen quite a bit of this kind of stuff, especially with the 1 lane, 50s ranches, just have very little parking.
Then I won't ask for the addition of something like this.
But I mean, we will gladly look into anything that you want us to and give you a recommendation in the next meeting. But that's one's off the top of my head. I think that would be pretty vicious.
Well, I guess my question would be, is there a kind of number that there would be a pretty good consensus that it has become a mess? Like if you had 8 cars crammed into a driveway. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, but I am curious, and Lisa's examples raise that for me.
Right, and that does get very difficult because every driveway is unique. If you have a 2-lane, 100-foot deep driveway, it's going to have much different impact than a smaller one. If you have a large lot, much different than if you're in a tight urban lot. But the hard part is to make a code that's that dynamic, it almost becomes judgmental. And
thank you. That's helpful.
And some people could argue arbitrary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing.
And enforcement could be an issue as well, I would think. Right, Dave? David?
Oh, definitely, because cars come and go all the time. You'd have to be out there all the time to see who's there.
Yeah, yeah, good point.
So, and I mean, the other thing I am going to point out with any of these code changes, they can always be changed back if it becomes a nightmare. So, not that we want to be changing code all the time, but we try to vet them out as much as possible. But just like these 14, you know, there's always room for improvement, even in a new code.
I mean, I think the only thing that we're doing in the change, it doesn't have to do with the number of cars or anything. It's just taking away that they have to be registered and licensed. So
Correct.
For probably the vast majority of people who are just having, you know, one car that's sitting, or an old car, like I have a 85, but it's in storage. Haven't had plates on that thing for over 10 years. So it's just taking that money away, and the vast majority of people probably aren't hoarding cars.
Probably not.
Is that what we're hoping?
Well, again, most of these codes are written for the worst scenario you can think of. So,
Right. Okay. I don't know. Part of me always wants to take away the fees that are involved and things, make life easier for people. But yeah, I don't think the vast majority of people are hoarding cars. That takes a lot of effort, I feel like.
be surprised.
Well, now you
can hoard motorcycles too.
All right. Well, were there any other points on this one, or any other things, any of the other of the 14 that anyone had discussion about, so that they can take this back? I know this wasn't on there at all, but I still want weekend parking on the streets.
Question on number
area.
90s, it was there. On Fridays and Saturday nights, you could park overnight on Green Bay City streets.
So I have a question on number 10, but Lisa, I agree with you. And I would extend that to just parking on the streets in general overnight. It works in a lot of other cities. Dave Hansen. Sorry, it was more DPW. It wasn't just you. I'm sorry.
We could take traffic commissions.
This is zoning. We don't deal with the streets.
Sorry.
I
agree, Lisa.
Time, yes.
Yeah, question for number 10, and I realize this is one that isn't highlighted at all, but I just wanted clarification. When you say, like, taking this out, if there's an issue, we'll just do another code change, or is it something that can be offered, like inspectors would offer it as a solution, where if this becomes a problem with people driving over that area, inspectors, you know, it gets reported to them, and then they would say, hey, just put this up and it will solve your problem.
Correct. So the way this is drafted now, I wish I would have turned some lights on and wore my glasses. But so the way it's worded, if found to be driven over and in a deteriorated state, the city may require the installation of that vegetative or other block. So we have it kind of down as an administrative. So if you get consistent complaints, it's all muddy, it's rutted up, the inspector can order it to go in. They're just not ordering it to go in at the offset, because what they found was the majority of people don't go over that area, and they keep it, you know, they keep it nice. Again, it's always for the outliers. And in this case, that's drafted right in there in the language change.
Okay, no further questions.
All right. So,
do we need a motion then?
Well, staff recommends that you hold the item to the August 9th Plan Commission meeting for action, and we would need a motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
So a motion by Commissioner Bremer, second by Commissioner Ravinsky to hold this until the August 9th meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead with a vote.
I was laughing at DJ, sorry.
saw that too. All those in favor of holding?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so then this will come back to us August 9th.
Okay.
Moving on to informational director's reports.
Good evening, commissioners. Good discussion this evening. So thank you for all your efforts on that. Emailed a director's report, a written report to everyone here. Sorry for the late time just before the meeting. I know. So if you didn't see that, certainly take a look at that. Obviously, staff continues to work on a host of projects that are in the pipeline right now. So trying to focus on the larger ones, certainly not a comprehensive list by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly, obviously, staff can address any questions of anything that are on that particular list. So if anyone would like me to go through that, I will. Otherwise, I will just be happy to answer any questions. Looks like Commissioner Daniels may have a question.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question. So it happened to, it's great when you have two phones, so you can look at, you can look the report on one phone and be on the other one. I did look at your report, so question, again, full transparency because it's my neighborhood, but I did see that there was something, I think it's item 2 or 3 to release the TIF fund park project, on the Whitney Park project 1 year before. Because I'm assuming that's because half the project is done, and so they're asking for those accommodations, even though half the project is done. Is that correct?
Yeah, essentially, this was the phase that was completed was actually what they had proposed in the development agreement. But the way the TIF agreements generally work is when the project is completed, obviously they get their occupancy permit. Then the following January 1, that project becomes fully assessed as a completed project. And then the actual first tax payment, property tax payment on that is the following year, which is then usually the income stream where the TIF payment happens. Well, in this particular instance, they missed the cutoff of the year. The project was essentially done at the end of 2019, but they didn't get the occupancy permit until like 2 weeks afterwards. So they were substantially completed and assessed. And as such, they were asking because they did actually generate increment, even though that 1 year delay was in flag, if they could actually receive a partial increment payment 1 year earlier than essentially was established in the agreement. So essentially, it was mostly there was adequate cash flow. So staff is recommending approval on that. And that's going to the RDA tomorrow. We understand I think their occupancy is actually extremely well right now. I think the apartments are largely leased up. I think their condos have just recently, the condo aspect of the project has just finally recently mostly sold. I think there maybe was 1 unit left, if not entirely. So we would actually anticipate them bringing in the next phase probably hopefully either this fall or early next spring.
Thank you. That was going to be my next question. If you release the funds now, would that give them incentive to not complete the rest of the project?
Yeah,
or
I think
are they intending on completing the rest of the project? Yeah.
I think that the market and their overall investment that they've already got on it is going to be plenty of investment, Commissioner. I think they're going to be coming pretty fast with that next phase.
Awesome. Thank you.
I just wanted to add in a little observation. I was driving over the Mason Street Bridge, which thankfully yep. But there was a sailboat that was actually docked over by the shipyard. So excited to see, it was cool to see that. And I'm like, oh no, there aren't docks yet, but can't wait for that to go through. So I'm glad to see that that's on the report.
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner. It is one thing that Matt Buchanan on my staff has been working very closely with Stantec, our consultant, to kind of calling them the phase 1 infrastructure improvements, essentially. That will include a lot of the waterfront amenities, the trail, and so forth. That will get in there. Certainly having some sort of marina or aspect of there, will be a nice thing certainly to have. I think we're also making some improvements to Light Park right now. I think Public Works is looking on that area as well. So we really are improving that section of the river. Is going to really have some nice docking opportunities I think mostly for the public, some private, but most of it will be public access, I think. So we are excited to see what impact that's going to have on the area.
I was excited to see one sailboat, so I can't wait to see the whole project.
I have to say, though, I'm very excited about the bridge being down because I watched it when it got stuck. Like I was driving past, I'm like, I'm not going there.
we were very fortunate that the failure was not as catastrophic as was the first anticipated, and I don't know if Mr. Hanson has any more information on it, but it is functional. It's working now. Certainly, it still has some useful life concerns, I think, going forward, as do a couple of the other bridges in town. But right now, knock on wood, everything's working, and we're moving traffic just like we hope to be. So,
yeah, that was rough because I live downtown, like 5 blocks from the river. So like every time I need to go somewhere, all those bridges, all the traffic was horrible. So
yeah,
I'm very
it was
happy
bad enough.
It's all good now.
It was bad enough. Then all of a sudden we had a couple of scheduled ships come in too during that time. And then all the bridge, it was awful. Yeah. So, but it's Green Bay. We at least we know if it's going to go back down and get back to normal eventually. Usually folks are okay with that. But yeah, leaving that one up stuck for as long as it was a bummer. Hopefully it's back fixed and we won't have to deal with that here for quite some time.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Neil. All right. So now we're going to discuss transition to hybrid in-person virtual PC meetings.
Do we have, I guess, one thing we're looking at on this, obviously staff is continuing to evaluate exactly what our options are here going forward. Most folks are aware that the city council has gone back to a hybrid format in terms of actually meeting in the council chambers, but actually still being participating on Zoom. So far, that seems to be working fairly well. I think most folks are still, are comfortable with that situation in terms of technology and it working. Obviously, we continue to monitor the health numbers and things that are out there, and we're not seeing some great trends out there. So certainly, one of the concerns, there's two really main factors, I guess, that we look at as we go forward. One is certainly being able to maintain some degree of social distancing. So we have to make sure we're probably back in the council chambers, the largest room, making sure we're spreading folks out to the extent that we can. The other one is a technology issue in terms of being able to record the actual meeting in terms of when we're doing that. So I think that's why the council chambers is the primary location of when we would want to have to do that. From a staff standpoint, we are certainly capable of going either direction at this point, either continuing a virtual mode or going into a hybrid mode where we think some members would probably still choose to attend virtually. Certainly with members of the public, that's the other challenge in terms of, if we have people show up to a meeting, how do we manage those folks in that space, in a distancing environment and so forth. So we are continuing to still evaluate that. I think it was really kind of commissions what your desire would be. If you would like us to try to attempt a hybrid a meeting with some in-person attendance, we could certainly look at doing that and attempting that. But certainly, I think it is really up to the discretion of the commission at this point. Does anyone have any preferences one way or the other? I would ask.
I guess I don't have a preference one way or another. The only problem is when it's 90 degrees out, my air conditioner is in my bedroom. And at City Hall, there's air conditioning everywhere.
This is true.
I'm good with it either way. I would say if there's any hesitation from anyone else, I'm good with staying online, but I'm comfortable meeting in person. Others are. I'm fully vaccinated, so.
Yeah, I personally.
I'm staying virtual.
You want to stay virtual?
I said I'm fine staying virtual, but if people want to meet in person, I'm fine with that too. So I can go either way.
So we can we'll continue virtual. If folks want to think about that, we can bring that back up and have, when I say, I guess without a clear consensus, we'd say we would stay virtual until such time as the commission would like to meet in person again. So it's entirely up to this body when you would like us to attempt to try that and make that work. So
I guess my one concern about virtual is how difficult that makes it for people who want to speak with us. And the hybrid sounds like they would still be on the virtual side of things.
Now, even with a situation, I think Commissioner Bremer is even if someone showed up to a meeting in a hybrid format, if someone from the public showed up to a meeting and wanted to comment, we would still have to have them either on a laptop or something so they could actually be connected still via Zoom, even though they were there in person. So anybody else who was connected virtually could still hear them and they could participate that way. So that is the one wrinkle in terms of just folks in the public. I think at council, I don't believe we've had too many. I don't know if we've had anybody show up in person all their corpus tax. Have we seen anyone in person? I don't believe so. So we haven't been tested on that yet. But I think that's
it all depends on whether or not you've got a real controversy, right?
Well, exactly. Right. We get plan commission. We get some interesting ones every now and then. Folks might want to come talk to you guys. That's right.
Can you imagine the Popeyes conversation in person and virtual? That would have been a lot.
Yes, that would have been a long night. Yeah, absolutely. Would have tested our IT infrastructure, to say the least. Absolutely.
Already a long night to do it both ways.
I'm the one still in chambers.
Yeah, I assume we'd have some scheduling to work out too then, just for all the different commissions.
Yeah, in terms of obviously if everyone needs to use that same facility, we just need to make sure we're on a night where we don't have conflict. Obviously, we're selfish. We think I would be the first one to say the Plan Commission is an ordinance created, very statutory required entity that we're going to take priority over some of these other folks. I'll see how much that's 6 months on the job muscle still, if that really makes any difference or not. But yeah, it's a great point, Commissioner Miller. That, we got to make sure we don't have any conflicts. So
yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like maybe virtual might still work, especially going into the fall. Like, it's the time for more illness, and I would just think that it's, if anything happens, that it's going to get worse at that point. But I think from a ease of being a chair, I think in person would be easier for me, but I'm handling it ish. So I think virtual is okay.
You're handling
I
it
just imagine. Yeah, I just imagine being in person. I will say at my time on the commission, the seat I have never been. I've been virtual the whole entire time, so I know.
Right.
Sid and Jake and even Lisa.
Well.
So it's been virtual the whole time. So I don't even know.
You don't have anything to compare to, right?
Maria, you have no idea what we look like from the chest down.
That's right. I did see Sid the other night I think at State of the City. I think I saw Sid. That's right. So I run into it and I see Alder Corpus. I've seen Ken. So I've seen a couple folks out there, but yeah, it is a little unusual to say that I haven't actually met.
I saw Dave one day. Yeah, Dave Buck one day, and I waved at him. He was like, I don't know who that guy is.
Who's that guy? Yeah. All of a sudden, he kind of does one of these. Like, oh, wait a minute, I know who that is. There he is. I recognize him. That's right. So I guess for now we'll continue virtually. But I said at this point, I'd say it's really any time the commission would like to decide to go back to try to hybrid format, staff would be happy to accommodate that.
All right. That's June 21st. All right. So date of the next meeting is August 9th, 2021. Yeah.
And that said, I'll move to adjourn this meeting. No second?
Second.
What in the world? Yeah.
Like what?
Now I don't even know who gave that.
Ken.
Okay, all right. So motion by Commissioner Bremer and a second by Commissioner Ravinsky to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
You guys all stay cool. It is hot out there.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Watch out for those variants.